Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Cruz III, and I am the publisher of the Capital Sports Report. I am also the host of the Capital Sports Report Live. Tonight, we are joined by Mike Iaconelli, a pro bass fisherman and TV personality. But first, I would like to mention that my co host, Susan Wade, is in transit from California to Seattle, so she will not be participating tonight. So, just myself, talk to Mike Iaconelli. Welcome, Mike. How are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thank you for having me tonight.
This past weekend, you were fishing in a tournament in Florida. Could you talk about how you did?
Yes, the season started. The way the Bass Tour runs, we start in February and we run all the way through the fall. So, our season really began last week in Florida. We had two back-to-back events. First one was on the St. John's, and then last week was the second event was on the Harris Chain, and Leesburg, Florida. So not far north of Orlando, and it was a good event for me. I had a good finish. I ended up 35th out of 100 anglers, which was a good event. And our season is a lot like a race with points. And of course, every tournament you're trying to win, you want to win. That's the goal. But there's also a time where you need to just have a good event, get points, and get on to the next one. And the two Florida events for me were kind of like that. My performance has never been great in Florida over the years. So to get through, especially have a good one in that last event, get on to the next tournament, get some points, it was a good week for me.
Why do you struggle in Florida?
I think I struggle in Florida for two reasons. The first one is bass that are in Florida are Florida strain bass. They're not northern strain bass. And because of that, they act a little different. A really minor cold front can really shut them down. But the main reason I struggle in Florida is the fact that you have to slow down for those fish. I would say for the most part. So, in my style of fishing, if you think about fishing, if you're not familiar with it, in professional fishing, there's a lot of different styles, just like in other sports. And my style is fishing really fast, covering a lot of water. I call it power fishing. And I think I've struggled in Florida all these years because it's hard for me to slow down. And, it's easy for me to talk about it. And I can easily say, yeah, dummy, slow down, but it's hard to change your style and the way you fish. And that's the reality for me. So I think I've struggled a little bit because it's hard for me to fish slow. I like to move. I like to cover water. I can't sit still. I'm ADD. I'm from New Jersey, for crying out loud. I can't sit still.
Yeah. Speaking of New Jersey, I'm in Burlington County. You're a little southern of New
Yep.
Jersey. You got introduced to fishing at a young age with your family going on summer trips. For those
Yes.
that don't know, can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in Philadelphia. We lived in South Philadelphia till I was 6, and we moved to a town called Runnymede, which is a glorified suburb of Philadelphia. It's just across the bridge. And growing up there as a kid, fishing wasn't really a thing, right? But what saved me and what got me into fishing was my family fished. So my family were the oddballs from South Philly that fished and brought me into this hobby and life of being outdoors and spending time on the water fishing. And so from when I was a kid, I didn't know any better. I thought everybody on their summer vacations would fish, and very typical of Philadelphia and South Jersey, our summer vacations were Poconos and Jersey Shore. That was it. And that was a big trip, right? It was, going 2 hours from the house is a big trip. So they were big. It was a big deal, right? It was a big deal. You got to put it all in perspective. Working class family from South Philly, getting a week at the Jersey Shore, that's a big deal, man. Getting a week in the Poconos, that's a big deal. But on those trips, we fished, and I can vividly remember, my uncle and my grandfather, and that's what they did on these trips. They didn't golf and they didn't, hike, and they didn't they fish. That's what they did. They went out to catch fish. And so I was brought up in that environment. And I think, having some success early on really breeds you to want to do more and get better. Like I see it in other young kids that have a knack for soccer or hockey or building rockets or whatever it is, right? When you're good at it at an early age, or people tell you you're good at it, you want to do more and you want to get better. And I think that was the bug that bit me early on. I had some success just catching fish and having fun. That's it, right? Not competitive at all at that point. But I think it instilled in me that I wanted to get better. I wanted to fish more. I wanted to learn more. And, honestly, by the time I was in my teens, I was already looking at the sport of professional bass fishing from afar and saying, wow, like people do this for a living. This is a job. People make money fishing tournaments. And so even as a teenager, 13, 14, 15, I think I was already aspiring to do it professionally in my mind at some level,
I read at 12 years old, you caught your first bass, and then you thought in your mind, I want to do this professionally.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It bit me. And I mean, looking back on it, I may have caught some small bass before that, but like on accident, but okay. That bass was the first bass I caught bass fishing. And it was one of the first fish I caught on an artificial lure. Up to that point, a lot of it had been live bait. A lot of it had been trolling. And this was the first really big bass that I caught on a lure, mimicking the movement of a natural forage and that whole puzzle piece of fishing, right? Really, I think it just, that one fish sort of launched me in that direction, and, I talk to a lot of other anglers and they always talk about the fish that hooked them. No pun intended, the fish that hooked them on the sport. And that was for sure the one that brought me over the top. It hooked me, but it really brought me over the top into wanting to target bass more and more, and up to that point, it was just anything that bit. And I still love to fish for everything. I still love the tug, the fight, of any species, but there's something about a bass, and there's something about, like I said, the puzzle of, figuring out a way to catch them on something artificial, okay. And that to me, all these years later, I'm an old guy now, I'm 50. All these years later, that's still the attraction to me to the sport, right? I go in these tournaments and yes, I want to win. Yes, I love I have trophies here in the office. Yes, that's great. But I still want to I strive to figure out how to catch them on something that's not real, how to pattern the fish, how to, that puzzle. I make the analogy a lot of, because I'm from that era, but like the Rubik's Cube. The Rubik's Cube used to frustrate me. I never figured it out. When I would solve one side of all colors, I'd be happy. I could never figure the whole thing out. But that's like fishing. Fishing is like that Rubik's Cube. You keep turning and twisting and you get close, and then finally you solve that side of the Rubik's Cube where it's all the same color. And that's you figuring the fish out, and that puzzle, that part of it still is the reason I'm doing it today.
When did you finally realize that you can do this as a career? What age did you say, okay, I'm going to pursue this as a career?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I'll go back and say from when I was probably 12, 13, 14, I realized there was a career, and I looked from afar at it and said, wow, that would be awesome. But it wasn't a true, yes, I can do this. Yes, this is what I want to do. It was more of a dream at that point.
Yes.
When I I went to Rowan University, and when I was a sophomore, I started fishing a few of the Pro-Am events, the Bassmaster Pro-Am events. So the first one I entered, I didn't do very well. The second one I entered, I won. And so you have to really put that in context. I'm a sophomore in college. I'm 20-something years old, 23 years old. And I win first place, which is a fully rigged Ranger bass boat, outboard trailer, everything valued at $30,000. And, when you're young and you're a college kid and all of a sudden something like that happens, I think the reality kicked in that, look, I can compete nationally. I now have a vehicle at which I can pursue this dream. So that's really when I look back and say, when did I really set my sights on it? It was after I won that event. And I think literally probably on the drive home from that event, in my mind, I started to map out the path and the route. And that's not an easy thing. And especially then it wasn't. When you look at the history of the sport, we're still a very young sport. Professional fishing really started in the late 60s, early 70s. So when you compare that to other professional sports, baseball, basketball, golf, hockey, tennis, man, those sports are old. Those sports are from the 1800s, early 1900s. Our sport's young. And so for me, in that era in the early 90s, there was no good route for a young kid from New Jersey to get to that top tour. So I had to figure it out. I had to go through the process of figuring out how to do that. And that meant, a lot of work and a lot of, fishing regionally and, in the Northeast, and then, this and this and this. And I really had to claw to get there. It wasn't something that was a given. Fast forward to 2000 in the 2020s. Now we have high school fishing programs. We have college bass fishing teams. We have these young anglers that are grooming themselves to do this professionally from a very young age. But for me, that path wasn't there. So it was a lot of work. And I definitely, my path to success was a slower one where I really had to just take the steps, step by step by step by step.
You had to show a lot of perseverance in overcoming the odds that were against you to make it where you are today.
A lot of things working against me and things that worked for me that I realized were strengths, So, a Southern angler, even as a kid, can fish 11 months out of the year. Growing up here, we had a shorter season. There were less people that fished, less people to lean on. But we did have a really strong community here of bass fishermen in South Jersey. And I leaned on those people and the club level and created a peer group and all that stuff. And the other thing about growing up in New Jersey is that, honestly, the fishing here is tough. It's not easy. It's in many cases a struggle. And, years later, all that came back to help me, because when fishing's tough in a tournament, I tend to excel. And then, the other thing that I mentioned, which was I was an oddball at the time, I used those oddities to my advantage. And, the thing to keep in mind for a lot of your listeners and viewers is fishing is as much the activity of fishing. Professional fishing is as much the activity of fishing as it is promotion and marketing and sales, a little like NASCAR. So I was, at the time I wanted to pursue it, I started to realize, I was smart enough to realize that I could use things that were different about me and odd and strange and weird to my advantage, and, and lean on that and leverage that to attract sponsorships and promotion and eyeballs. And, years later, it worked out. I don't think I could be where I am today had I grown up in Alabama or Texas or Florida. And that's true.
You were talking about fishing here in New Jersey. We have the
Yes.
Delaware River here that you fished on a lot of times.
Yes.
For those that do not know, could you tell them what it's like to fish here in the Delaware River?
Wow, the Delaware River is a challenging river for fishing. And one of the main reasons is the fishing has gotten a lot better. Like I can sort of remember my first few fishing experiences in the Schuylkill River, and you would catch catfish and carp, and it was sort of I don't want to call it dead fishery, but a polluted fishery in the mid to late 70s. Clean Water Acts and regulations over the years clean the water, and the grass came back, and the fishing is better now than it's ever been, but still very challenging. You have to remember the Delaware River's tidal. So 2 times a day, that river level changes 7 or 8 feet in height. It's tidal, right? So up 7 or 8, down 7 or 8, up 7 or 8, down 7 or 8. And that makes for tough fishing because fish are always on the move. And again, I wouldn't put it even in the top 50 of best places to fish in the United States. But learning in that tough environment and learning how fish move during tidal cycles, learning how to fish current, how to fish in a city, right? How to fish with concrete and metal instead of natural grass, all that stuff. That all ended up helping me in the long run, right? So, I think for me, a lot of my success was turning the ability to turn negatives into positives, even to this day, I think a lot of my success is based off of that.
And also fishing here in the Delaware, you have a lot of pollution, like people throw stuff in the river all the time. And as a fisherman, that's got to be tough to figure out, like what's a fish and what's not a fish, even though you may have in your boat today, you have like that fishing machine that tells you where the fish are.
Yeah.
It's still got to be difficult to fish with all the stuff that's in the river today.
Yeah, it's another element, and we're, as a pro angler, we travel the country. We're presented with all these elements and changes and challenges that we have to work through and work around. So yes, in the Delaware, it's tide and it's pollution and it's current. In other places, it's weather, waves, cold fronts, moon phase, water temperature. There's all these elements. And one of the things you have to be really good at is analyzing the conditions and being a critical thinker, right? So when you think of professional fishing, it's more a mind exercise, right? It's more of the study of the behavior of the fish and your decisions you make on the water to follow those fish. So, mechanics is important. Casting, reeling, setting the hook, body movement, physical preparation, all that, just like other sports, is important. But professional fishing definitely leverages more on the mind, for sure.
How long does it take you to figure that out when you go to a location that you may not have been to before, or you've been to previously, and you've been somewhere else before this event? So it's going to take you some time to reacclimate to where you were before.
Yeah, for sure. And the answer to that is it takes as long as you get your first clues. And so, what I mean by that is I've had entire tournaments, 3 days of practice, 3 days of tournament fishing, where I never figured it out. Honestly, even at this age, competing all these years, you'd think, oh, yeah, this guy's been fishing for 30 years. He's going to figure it out every time. No, I have tournaments still where I don't figure it out. But every scenario is different. And, what I'm looking for are pieces of the puzzle. And, it's like you can't figure it out until you get those first bits of information. So the quicker you get those bits of information and you analyze them and then you convert them to your next cast or your next area, that's when you start to figure it out. My golden rule is it's like a playbook that's 50-50.
Okay.
And 50% of my playbook are things that I know and have learned and have studied, right? So half of the playbook, the left side of the playbook, are seasonal patterns, conditions that I've seen before that remind me of this, the current weather patterns, the current water clarity, all these things that I can take from my body of knowledge existing that I could put into this scenario. That's half of it. But the other half of the playbook, and to be honest with you, the more important part of the playbook is what I call fishing the moment.
Okay.
And that is, yeah, you've got great info on this side of the playbook and your notes and your history and your info and what the book says. But you've got to fish the moment. And you've got to fish for that moment in time because it's hardly ever the same.
Yes.
You can fish Lake Champlain every year, June 5th, for 20 years. And I promise you, it will never be the same June 5th from year to year to year. And so by having an open mind and fishing the moment, it's basically you're fishing what's in front of you and you're letting the fish tell you what to do. So with that playbook, you need information from the fish. And, so when I get a bite, that's a very important piece of information that I build on. But until I get that bite, it's tough. It's tough to figure out.
Mike, for 2 decades, you've been a professional bass fisherman. What does that mean to you to have this prolonged career in the sport that you love?
It means a lot. It means a lot. I can tell you on the good side, it is honestly a dream job, right? Like, I do sort of pinch myself every now and then and think back to when I was that kid and I said, man, wouldn't that be amazing? And I got to do it. I'm doing it now. I've got to live that dream. So that's very, great feeling, to aspire to something and to then do it. And I make a living fishing and it's what I love. It's my passion. It's my hobby. That's amazing. And so I look back on that. I'm grateful every day. The longevity, I'm grateful for the longevity for the fans and the sponsors and the support. I've been able to make a really good living doing this for this long. There's a lot of professional anglers that are struggling 20, 30 years in. And so I'm very, very thankful for that. Man, I've got probably the most amazing fan base ever, and I mean, broad range from 80-year-old guys in Alabama to 10-year-old kids that live in the Bronx, white kids, black kids, Spanish kids, it's great. It's very flattering. I look back on my career and man, that was amazing. I look back to on the negative side, there's been stuff too, right? Like the one thing that fishing has taken me away from regular life. And you got to remember the sport is that of a traveling gypsy. And for the last 20 plus years, I've been on the road a lot. We had one of these interviews set up and I couldn't do it because I was on the road. I got caught on the road late. I couldn't get to the show. Yeah, I couldn't get to the hotel to do this interview. So, I look back on the things I've missed and that's the reality of it, is the life I chose, but it's not all positive, but man, as I look, I look toward the end of my career, I don't know. It's hard to say. In this sport, your lifespan is a lot longer than say baseball or football or hockey, right?
Yeah.
When you're 50 there, you're not playing no more. I'm 50, I'm still playing. So, but I do see the end, right? I can visualize and close my eyes and say, I'm 5 or 10 or 15 years away from retirement. It competitively, I see that end, but man, it's been a fun ride. I even as I'm talking to you now, I look around and this is such a cool place for me here in the office because I see the trophies and the accolades, and I can look at them and remember the experiences. And it's been a fun ride. I wouldn't change anything. There's definitely been mistakes and errors in my career and things I wish I could go back and do different. But I also wouldn't want to, and I wouldn't want to change anything because I think the person I am today, the competitor I am today, is all because of what's happened. So it's been a great career so far.
And you talked about being on the road, and one thing that has to be a struggle for you is you got 4 kids and a wife at home. Your daughter was at LSU. I don't know if she graduated.
Yep.
So she was away for a while, but you still had 3 at home. So that has to be tough for when you're away because you can't be around them.
It's super tough. Like I said, looking back on it, it's probably the biggest negative or biggest regret, is the time away from home. And you've got to figure out ways to make it work. And technology has helped tremendously with that. And, Skype and this box that I carry in my
Your cell phone.
Yeah. I mean, those things have helped, but you can't go back and I've missed graduations and I've missed, winning scores at games and, those things you can't go back, and I can't go back and make those. You have to figure out ways to make it work. I'm a professional fisherman. I travel. That's what I do. And you do your best to make those things work.
Recently, a few weeks ago, you had a very tough decision to make. You had a choice to go back to the Bassmasters or continue with Major League Fishing.
Yes.
For those who do not know, you went back to the Bassmasters where you began your career. Could you talk more about why you went back to the Bassmasters?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, in this sport, at this current time, there are 2 leagues instead of 1. Just, real quick, I think in our evolution of our sport, there will be 1. There needs to be 1 ultimately. But at this time, there are 2. And they're both really great circuits. They're set up a little different. The way of competition and the structure is a little different. And it wasn't an easy decision because I think both circuits are very valuable. Both circuits are doing good things. Both circuits are growing the sport. They have great visibility. But I think one of the reasons that I ultimately made the decision to go back to bass is it's where I began my career, and it's really where I wanted to end my career. So, again, getting back to what we talked about earlier, man, I can remember being a kid and getting this magazine. And by the way, ironically, there's Aaron on the cover. There's Aaron Martin's on the cover. I remember being a kid and getting this magazine, and that's where I first saw the sport. And that's when I saw that, I said, these guys are fishing. And, and when I worked through all those levels and won my first boat as an amateur and won my first national event, and it was all through bass, right? So that history brought me back for sure. It felt more like home. But the other piece to it, just as important, is the fans. So Major League Fishing is a made for TV. It's a made for live viewing league. There is no events portion to the competition. And for me, one of the things that I missed about bass, I fished MLF for a few years, is I missed getting off the water at a weigh-in, weighing your fish, physically weighing your fish, and then coming off stage to fans, right? Of all walks of life, coming off the stage to kids who want your autograph, coming off the stage to that energy. Maybe that's the best word to say it, of a crowd. And that was really another factor that brought me back to bass. I miss that. I miss that a lot. Like it's a key part of it. And When I really missed it was when I had a bad tournament, right? Like, when you have a good tournament, everything's great. But when you have a bad tournament, you go up and you're dejected and you feel terrible and you're mad and you're frustrated. And at those kind of events, when I get off the stage and the fans are there, they really sort of, it's a way to snap me out of it, because I think it's a reality check that what we talked about, man, I'm fishing for a living. Yeah, we all have bad days. I had a bad day on the water. I had a bad day at work. But look at these people. People drove 3 hours, 5 hours. They drove 10 hours because they want to come talk to me. That element to me was missing. And it was really probably the driving factor of why I decided to go back to bass.
We have a viewer question for you from Paul. It said, "What's your PB bass in New Jersey?" You might know what he's referring to.
Yeah. PB is acronym for personal best. And that's a great question, Paul. So my personal best in New Jersey, and this is going to sound ridiculous because I caught it in Burlington County. I caught it at Mira Lake, Browns Lake, not right near in Burlington County, not far from the military base there. I caught a 9-1 in 1991. So I was club fishing at the time. I had a John boat. It was not even a competition day. It was a fun fishing day. I caught a 9-1 on a jig, and a 9-pounder in New Jersey is ridiculously big. It's a giant, but to this day, it's the biggest, my PB in New Jersey. Our state record is only 1013 or something. So I was up, a little under 2 pounds away from the state record. But I'll never forget that fish. It was a monster.
Back to the Bassmasters, you said in a video a few weeks ago when you did a live that you have maybe 5 best years left in you in this, give or take.
Yeah, give or take. I would call 5 to 15, but okay. Yeah, that's about right.
Why do you think you only have 5 good years left?
Well, there's more to that. And that doesn't necessarily hinge just on my ability to perform and compete. Some of it hinges on what do I want to do from a personal standpoint? And let me explain it. The best way I can explain it is maybe I'll say it like this. When COVID hit, both tours, all our fishing tours, just like a lot of professional sports, were stopped. They were halted. So, we had eight month period there where there was no competition. And it was the first time in 25 plus years that I really took a break and stopped competing. And it really was refreshing, almost like a wake-up call that was a reminder that, hey, man, there are more things to life than work, right?
Yes.
than competing at the top tour level. And it really put things into perspective for me. It also was a time where we had to grow our other businesses in order to stay relevant. So, we grew a lot of the existing businesses, the Bass University, which is our education arm, Ike Live, which is our podcast arm, of course, our social and digital media. We created a TV show called My World. And then last but not least, we have a foundation that gets kids involved in fishing called the Ike Foundation. So for about a year, I really got to dive into those businesses and help those businesses. And I liked it. It was nice still working in a sport that I loved without competing at a top tour. So there were for sure elements that I missed. And it's the reason I came back to compete is I still wanted to compete. But it made me realize that I don't want to be the guy competing at the top tour level when I'm 67, when I'm 70, when I'm 72. And we have those guys.
Okay.
And I love those guys. I love them. But I don't want that to be me, And so, I think for me, I want to go out at a stage in my career when I'm still healthy and actively competing. I want to go out on my own terms, not because of my performance or my health or any of that. So, that's that 5 to 15 years. It's probably 5 to 10 years. I don't know. And I think I've talked to a lot of people in other walks of life about the same thing. And they all said, you'll know when you know, and I'm not ready now. I can easily tell you it's going to be 5 years. It might be 10, but I think when the time comes, I think I'll know.
With the sport shut down due to COVID, you had to find a way outside of the other ventures that you do to still fish so you don't get rusty.
Yes.
How often did you go out during the COVID era that we were previously in to still fish, to still make sure that I'm still working on what I need to work on to make sure that I'm still at my top of my game?
Yep, great question. And I would say a lot. And you hit it right on the head, which is like any other sport, the more you do it, the more you engage in the activity, the better you get, right? I tell my kids now, we've got a couple younger ones that play field hockey, lacrosse, and soccer. And I always tell them, practice like you play and play like you practice, right? Because they're one and the same. So during that COVID era, I fished a lot. And we just changed the focus, right? From tournaments to digital content, social media, the TV show. But the whole time we would fish and film, my mindset was the same, right? It was that puzzle that I talked about. It was, I want to figure these fish out. I still had a limited amount of time, right? Because I only had 6 or 8 hours to film and fish. So in my mind, I was still competing against the fish, right? And that's ultimately the neat thing about our sport. Even in these tournaments where I have 100 to 150 other competitors, my competitor is really the fish. And so, even during COVID, I was able to keep engaging in my craft and keep sharp and keep up with the latest and the greatest. We have a lot of changes every year with innovations and technologies, and you have to stay on top of that stuff. And you can't sort of rest on what you've been good at for 20 years. You have to keep getting good, and you have to keep learning new stuff. And that's important, or you'll definitely get stagnant in this sport.
We just had the Super Bowl like 8 days ago, and your Super Bowl is in a few days, and the beginning of March in South Carolina in the Bassmasters Classic, which you previously won.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what it's like to compete in the Bassmasters Classic?
Yeah, man, it's the classic. Is you hit it right on the head with the Super Bowl analogy. If you're listening or watching this right now, whatever your favorite sport is, think of the biggest event in that sport. The Super Bowl, the World Series, the NBA Finals, whatever it is, the Stanley Cup. That's this event. And for everyone in the sport, they know that the Bassmaster Classic is the world championship of professional fishing. So it's always held that esteem. And I can remember being a kid and watching the Classic on TNN. I don't even think TNN's around anymore.
I think so.
Bassmasters was on TNN back then. And I remember watching some of the winners of that era. So we're probably in the mid 80s when I'm talking about. And Rick Clunn and Hank Parker, some of the early winners there, and watching it on TV, I would get chills. Like my hairs would stand up my arms just watching it as a fan back then. And so, it has that kind of esteem to it. And, I've made 20 classics in my career. I've won 1 out of 20. I've had a second place and a few top 5s. It's a hard event to win. Everything has to go perfect over 3 days. But I can tell you it never got old. All those classics, you'd think, Well, yeah, after you made 10, it's got to be old hat. It never got old. It always was the most special, dynamic event of the year. It had the most visibility, the most coverage, the most fan attendance. The year that I won, it was at the Superdome in New Orleans. And I'll never forget that feeling of being driven into the arena, on your truck and boat and coming in and pulling up to a stage and weighing your fish. And then when you win, hoisting that trophy over your head and the pyrotechnics and the confetti and the all that fanfare that goes with the win. And it is the biggest title you can win in our sport. So, the thing I can tell you is that I always heard that it's a career changer. And after I won, I can tell you that it is. It is. It is an event that if you win, it solidifies your place in the sport, right? If you've never won another tournament after it for the rest of your life, you're a classic winner, right? Just like you're a Super Bowl champ, and it solidified a place in the sport. So yeah, it was when I won, I was relatively young in my career, but it did set the tone for my entire career. And, I'm a classic champ. There's not that many of us. I'm one of them. It means a lot. It's a title it's what you fish for. It's what everyone fishes for, And I don't think your career is complete until you've won one. And I've heard football players and baseball players and hockey players do the same thing. Your career is not complete unless you've won that title.
And that was the same, like yesterday was the Daytona 500, and they say for all the racers, like whoever wins it is like their career is made because they won the Daytona 500.
Absolutely. Same thing. And there's a lot in our sport too that winning it in itself is important and special, but winning it and taking the opportunities that are giving to you through the win is just as important. So, like when I look back on my 2003 win, that next year, I was the reigning classic champ. For a year, I had that title. And I took every opportunity during that year. I said yes to everything, to media and radio, and, podcasting wasn't even a thing back then. But
yes.
Anything that was an opportunity, I said yes to, right? And when you do that, it really does. I look back on it, and man, like some of the success I have today, I can really look back on that 12-month reign and say, man, thank God I said yes to everything, because it really did help.
We have another submission from Paul. If you could only fish one for the rest of your life, are you going with a spinning setup or a baitcaster?
Man, Paul, you got all the good questions tonight. That's a tough choice because I think that a spinning rod and a baitcaster are both essential tools, right? So, if you're a carpenter, man, you got to have a hammer and you got to have a screwdriver, right? You got to have them both because you can't do carpentry without both those tools. It's the same in fishing. I need both. But if I had to have one, it would be a spinning rod, especially if we're talking about fishing in general, right? If we're just saying fishing, like if I was on an island and I had to feed my family with one combo, it would be spinning. If I was in the saltwater and my life depended on catching fish with one combo, it would be spinning. I really think spinning's a little more versatile. And for catching fish and getting bites, nothing's better than spinning rod and light line.
Back to the Bassmasters Classic. Hank Cherry has won the past 2 in a row. Somebody hopefully can break his streak going this year. Do you think he can go for 3 in a row, or do you think the odds are in someone else's favor? Maybe yours.
Yeah, Hank's a great fisherman, and there's very few. I want to say it's probably less than 6 anglers have won multiple classics, let alone back-to-back. Jordan Lee did it recently, young kid from Alabama, and Hank's done it recently. It's very, very difficult, but it does tell you a lot about the nature of that tournament. So, at the beginning of this podcast, I got on and told you, man, I was happy in that last event to have a 35th place finish because I got out of there with points.
Yes.
In that tournament, it's all or nothing. And certain anglers strive for that kind of event where you take risks and you take chances and you're not afraid to lose. You're not afraid to not catch 5. And you have to have that mentality. So, some of those anglers, Jordan Lee and Hank Cherry for sure, are anglers that strive, that thrive in that environment of all or nothing. And, saying that, I would definitely think Hank has a possibility to win again. At the same time, it's going to be really difficult to win 3 in a row. If I was placing bets right now, if this was a Vegas betting table, I'm going to say Hank's not going to win again. But you never know. It's fishing, and on any given day, any of those guys could be the best on that particular lake. It's at Lake Hartwell. It's in South Carolina this year.
Yep.
Weather is going to be a huge factor on who wins, and it's hard to say at this point. But that'd be unbelievable if he did. Be crazy.
A few months ago, you debuted My World, where you went into different athletes' fields. 2 of them I've previously talked to. Martin Truex Jr., who's from New Jersey like us.
Yeah.
Also, Keyshawn Whitehorn. He's the PBR bull rider. You experience what they go through in their fields, and then you also brought them into your world. How did that come about where you were able to interact with these other drivers and athletes to bring them into your world and swap out and experience what they go through in their daily lives and their competitions?
Yeah, it was an awesome opportunity, and what a cool thing for me to be able to visit with them. It sort of came out of stuff that was already happening. So I want to put it at, maybe about 10 years ago, Becky would start fielding these calls from athletes from other sports. And, all of a sudden, we'd get this athlete that would reach out, or their manager or handler would reach out to us and be like, hey, so-and-so wants to fish with you. What? Like that person? Like you mean like Deion Sanders, like the football Deion Sanders? Yeah. Deion wants to fish with Mike, and because he's a fish. He loves to fish. He does? Really? And so year after year, we've started figuring out more of these athletes and celebrities and politicians and famous people that love to fish. And so, the concept really was spawned out of that. And it was such a neat opportunity for me. Like when I look at filming last year, season 1, the fishing part to me was fun. I love to fish. Don't get me wrong. But to be able to get into their world for a day and experience it was incredible. So yeah, you named a few, to be driving 130 miles an hour on a dirt track. Incredible. To be on a bull.
That was Long Stadium, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was crazy. To be on a bull next to Keyshawn, who's one of the best bull riders in the world. Incredible. And the same goes for every one of the guests last year. It was incredible to see how hard they worked and to see how talented they are. I think it's very easy, even for me as a fan of those other sports, it's very easy, right, to sit on your couch, turn on Fox or CBS Sports or whatever, and watch these sports and say, yeah, man, he's pretty good, or yeah, he must have a natural talent, or oh, he's crazy, or oh yeah, she got lucky, or whatever. But to actually engage with them and see why they're the best in their craft, It was great. You know, honestly, I can tell you, I'm not very good at anything except fishing. So, so I was raw and as rough as they come for all those athletes. And it was a fun learning experience to have to see and figure out what they go through. When we got to the fishing portion, it was nice because I got to flip it and they got to come into my world. And we got some great fish catches in during the shows. But man, it was an awesome experience. It was fun. I hope everybody loved it. And really, here's the other thing we wanted to do with this show. And I feel like we did it, and I cannot wait for season 2. So excited to start filming season 2. Is we wanted to get fishing in front of people that didn't normally fish. And that's a hard chore, because how do you get someone that's a fan of sports to watch another sport, right? And this was a way to do it. So, you know, Marina Alex is one of the world's best female golfers. I know that we got golfers watching the show that watched it and said, man, this fishing thing looks fun. Football, you know, all of them, they're all the same, right? How do we get fans to watch this and say, fishing's something I want to try? Fishing, this looks fun. I might want to try it, right? So a major motivation of the show, yeah, we wanted to entertain people, and it was fun, and I had a great time doing it. But we're trying to grow the sport. We really are. And this was a great way to do it. Man, you know, you're not going to grow it by just keeping the same people, right? You got to get new people active. You got to get new people engaged. So I think it did a good job of showing the sport of fishing to some new people, and can't wait to start filming season 2. It's going to be even better.
You mentioned on the first show you had this moment on the like teaser video that I saw where you're in the octagon with Jim Miller and you say, "Get me out of here."
It's amazing. Like I said, the Jim Miller one's a great example because Jim's another Jersey guy, and you know, it's very easy to look at UFC and to look at that sport and say, yeah, these guys are tough. They're probably a little crazy and they're tough, but that's that. But when I got into the gym with Jim to see the training and the expertise and the moves, right? Jim's not a big guy. Like when you see him on TV, you're like, oh, he's kind of big. But in person, dude, Jim's like my size. He's like, he actually might be shorter than me. I don't know. He's definitely more in shape, but he's not a big guy. But the technique and the skill and the training, when you see all that up close, it's amazing. Yeah, and he's a scary dude. And honestly, being in an octagon with Jim, I wanted to escape. He's that he's that kind of guy. He's scary, man.
You mentioned season 2. When do you start filming? Are you allowed to comment anything on that?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple details. Yeah, we're going to start filming in April for season 2, and we're going to be doing a 6 new episodes. You're going to get to see them again in the fall of this coming year of 22. So I can tell you that we found a nice mix in season 1 of mainstream sports and what I call more, you know, off the cuff sports. And you're going to see that again in season 2. So you'll see 3 of the episodes, very mainstream sports. You know, I can hint a little and tell you that you're going to see a baseball episode and a hockey episode and a soccer episode with very mainstream sports. You're also going to see 3 that are not mainstream sports that are, you know, the bull riding and bowling were 2, you know, ones that were not mainstream from last year. And they are just as hardcore sports as any other sport. Trust me. So I like those 2 because I feel like fishing is a lot like that, right? Where, you know, people look at fishing and are kind of like, is that even a professional sport? You know? And I think a lot of these other, you know, sports that aren't at the very top level have that same stigma. And it's fun to debunk that and say, yeah, these guys are athletes too. These girls are just as good in these sports. So it's going to be a fun. I can't wait to start filming for them.
Mike, on your website recently, you released a few episodes of a documentary called "Never Give Up." Can you
Yes.
talk about that?
Yeah, man, Never Give Up was something that was brought up about a year ago, and it was one of those things where you have to sit on it for a little bit. And I sat on it and said, I think it's time that we do a docu-series like this. And it was easy for me to be able to look back in my career and tell the stories and to talk about what happened and the experiences, the good and the bad. It was easy for me to talk about that. And the other thing, from a personal standpoint, it actually was really refreshing too, right? It was really, it's almost like the more you talk about what happened, good and bad, that you're kind of like, yeah, you're right. You let it out and it frees you up a little bit. So, I wrote a book way back in like 2004, 2005 called Fishing on the Edge. And that was a great book that talked about a lot of what we talk about in the docu-series. But to be in front of a camera and to deliver it, from the heart, more personally, it was very freeing. The other great thing about this docu-series is it literally went from, birth, from stories my mom told me before I can remember, to that decision of going back to bass that we talked about in this interview. And so there's a lot of stuff there in that last 15 years that wasn't talked about in the book. And so, some of the big things that have happened in the sport, the league changes, some of the instances that happened of disqualifications, suspensions in my career, all that stuff I talked about. And I'm honest. I'm honest in a way where, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but I felt really strongly that in this docu-series, I had to tell it like it was. I had to be honest. And so I hope people watch it. I hope they watch it and they appreciate some of that honesty, and they're going to get to listen and experience, the highlights of my careers, the highest, most exciting, positive moments. And they're going to get to hear about the lows when I was in the gutter, ready to quit the sport. They're going to hear everything in between. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. I hope people get a chance to watch it.
Outside of fishing, you talked about in the very beginning, Bass University, Ike Live, and most importantly for you and Becky is likely the Ike Foundation.
Yeah.
Where you help promote the sport to the younger generation. And I know when I talked to you a few years ago, it was around the time that you were having the scholarship, and that was in a January. I talked to you in October, and then like in January, you had a scholarship for the younger generation where you're giving money away to young anglers. Could you talk about the Ike Foundation, where you help the younger generation give out money to them to help them grow the sport that you love?
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of the other businesses, and they've all been fun, and they've all had things that really drive us to grow the businesses. But the Ike Foundation is the one business that is that feel good one, right? It's that one where we're trying to do something really good. And I want to definitely mention that my wife Becky is the backbone of that. She's, I definitely am part of it and I help, but boy, she's the backbone of the Ike Foundation, and our motto is simple. Like when we started this, I think it's going on 9 years now. And when we came up with our what is this foundation going to be? What's the purpose of this foundation? And it was really pretty clear. And when I looked at my past and looked at where I came from as a kid, we really wanted to focus on how do we get new kids, particularly kids that wouldn't get involved in fishing on their own. How do we get them to experience the sport, right? So that's been our mission from day one. And it's like every year, Becky and the team at the Ike Foundation get better at figuring that out. So yes, we're awarding scholarships to graduating high school students that have an interest in the outdoors, but getting these kids fishing for the first time, man, that's been magic. That's been magic. And what we've got really good at is teaching people how to get kids fishing, especially in urban areas. So, we do a great job of either physically going to these places, creating events, hosting events, or working with groups to get new kids fishing. And that's through product donations, that's through instruction, that's through, all that stuff. And the feeling that you get when you see kids fishing for the first time, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. I can tell you that many of these kids that we target have never even cast a rod before, right? Let alone fishing. They've never even held a rod. And just the act of casting, when they make that cast for the first time and you see their face light up, there's something really, really special about that. We're trying to get kids fishing, not to create an army of professional anglers. Yes, that would be great. If some of these kids turn out to be pro anglers, that's awesome. And I love that. But we're trying to get these kids to experience the sport of fishing for the broader reasons, right? To have a connection with nature, to go into the outdoors, to have conservation on their mind and think about ecology and pollution, all those things. We talked about a lot of it tonight, right? To get those kids to think about that. And for many of these kids, it'll be a fun experience that they want to do again. It might turn into a hobby. It might turn into something they want to do when they're parents themselves with their kids, right? So it feels really good, what we're doing over there. And, man, at the end of the day, if we get even a few new kids fishing each year, we're doing our part. And that's the reality of it. The only way to grow a sport is from the bottom up, right? If you don't have new participation in a sport, it's never going to grow anywhere. So it's been really awesome. And this is one of those ones that's not going to go away for Becky and I. As my competitive career ends, I'm sure some of those businesses will go away. I'm sure some sponsorships will go away. But this is one we're going to be behind till the very end. And I mean, literally till I'm in a wheelchair or walker, you're going to see me supporting the Ike Foundation and trying to get new kids fishing.
Mike, here's your platform. Could you talk about your events for this 2022 season? And are you bringing back the special events where the people can purchase like an opportunity to fish with you? Or I know you had Greg De Palma, I believe that's his name, from Millville, who's also a Bassmaster.
Yeah.
You had an event with Harvey Horn, another professional fisherman.
Oh, yeah.
They all came to New Jersey to fish.
Yep.
So could you talk about the events that you're having for this year?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Ike Foundation, with COVID and with everything that happened, for sure, it was a little a time period there where it stymied our events. But with the world starting to get back to normal, our events are starting to get back to normal. And it feels really, really awesome. So the first big one will be the one you mentioned, which is our Celebrity Pro-Am. which is going to take place again this year. I cannot wait. So excited. Give me a second. I'll give you the exact date. It's going to be on the upper Chesapeake Bay this year, which is down in Northeast Maryland. It's a great event. If you're watching or listening right now, if you have a boat, you can enter the competition in your own boat. If you don't, come out. You can enter as a rider. You can fish with a celebrity or a pro angler. The date this year for us is June 5th is the date of our Pro-Am this year. So our Pro-Am's a big one. We also do a lot of fundraisers throughout the year. We're doing a celebrity auction this year where you're going to see a lot of memorabilia and products from pro anglers where we're auctioning off. All the proceeds are going to go to the Ike Foundation. And then, of course, our scholarship dinner got postponed this year, but it's back in the books for this coming fall. We don't have a date yet. It's tentative in the books for our scholarship dinner. Same thing, trying to raise money. But here's the great thing. We really try to create ambassadors of the sport. So, you know, we have a program where if you're watching or listening to this right now, and if you're in Denver or you're in Boise or you're in wherever you're at, we have a system in place where we can help you create organization to get kids involved. We will send them, we'll send you the product. We will give you the experience and the template to create this event. So it's real easy. If you're watching, listening, you say, yeah, I'd like to do something like this. It's real easy to get involved. All the stuff that I talked about, it's on theikefoundation.org. Please go there. You can help out. Even a simple donation of $1, 50 cents, whatever. You can do that on theikefoundation.org. And all that's going to go to help get new kids fishing. So I appreciate the support.
You mentioned the Pro-Am in the Chesapeake Bay.
Yes.
Last year, I believe you had an event in the Chesapeake Bay area.
We did.
That may have been the similar event, or was a little different?
Same event. You know, COVID got a little tricky with having the celebrities and the athletes and the pro anglers come, but we still had the event. So we had over 100 boats come out and support the event. The great thing in that event is this is a real tournament too, right? So we've been giving away a fully rigged bass boat. It's a Bass Cat boat with a Yamaha outboard for the last 4 or 5 years. So it's a great first place prize. I can tell you for this part of the world, the Northeast, there are no tournaments like that where they give away a boat. Things valued at about 50 grand. So wow. It's a great opportunity. You know, if you're watching and you fish local events or you fished, you know, regional events, but you never really wanted to compete at the highest level, come out and have fun. This is the kind of event where you can win some great prizes, but it's fun. It's all going to a good cause. It's going to be a good event.
Finally, Mike, we want to touch on Aaron Martins, pro brass angler who lost his life, I believe, in November. You might have known him. He had cancer for a while. He suffered through that for like 18 months and then passed away. Could you talk about his impact on the sport, and if you met him, what your experience was like with him?
Yeah. Aaron Martins was a one of a kind. I can tell you that. So from a competitive standpoint and from a professional standpoint, you know, you look at his career and his accolades, and he's a one of a kind, right? They called him the natural, and he really was. Aaron was the kind of guy that he almost instinctively could fish, right? Like I'll give you an example. For me, I need 3 full days of practice, and I have to fish dark to dark, and I need 1,000 lures and rods and reels to be able to catch the fish. But Aaron was like a natural. Like he was almost like thought like a fish, and he could sense the fish, and he was that good, right? And he's got so many titles in our sport. He's won Angler of the Year multiple times, and every I think every major title in both leagues he's won. So from a professional standpoint, he was one of the best. He was one of a kind. But it's the other side that, you know, really when I think about Aaron, I think about the person. And, you know, Aaron was the most sincere, humble, normal guy you'd ever want to meet, right? It was like, you know, and I'm just being honest, in a lot of sports, and fishing's one of them, man, when you're good and you start winning, a lot of athletes sort of change. And Aaron never did, right? Aaron's just the guy that's just, you know, kind of like an all shucks guy, you know, and, oh man, come on, you need a couple worms. Like, that's the way he was in life. He was that dude. And, you know, he never had a bad bone in his body. You know, he's one of those guys that would do anything for you, never had a bad bone in his body. And he really did leave an amazing legacy for a lot of people. He impacted so many people, and he will continue to do that. You know, when I look at the sport and I look at the way media has changed our sport and coverage and live coverage and video and content, you know, it's amazing that Aaron is going to be able to continue to impact people for years and years to come. So, dude, he was a one of a kind. I can tell you that. He's going to be really, really missed. He was a good friend of mine. We turned pro in the same year. We were the same exact age. I think I'm 2 months older than Aaron. We both came in 1999. We both tried the MLF tour for a few years. We both, you know, won Angler of the Years and Bassmasters. We both had kids about the same age. We camped near each other at many events. So, man, Aaron's going to be missed. But, you know, again, a guy like that has impacted so many people and changed so many people's lives for the better. So, we love Aaron. We still love Aaron. He was a great human being.
Thank you for your time tonight, Mike Iaconnelli. Good luck in about 2 weeks at the Bassmasters Classic, and good luck for the rest of your season.
Thank you. Appreciate the interview. It's always fun to be on. I hope to come on again soon.
Thank you again.
Bye.